Bueno, bienvenidos a todos al segundo semestre y en realidad a la cuarta edición del taller de invierno. Es un momento recontra especial para la escuela porque es el momento en el que nos vemos todos la cara. Bueno, hay otra aula, ¿no?, al lado, así que los incluyo en este mensaje. Pero lo lindo que tiene es que nos permite entregarnos a distintos arquitectos y ver a partir de las sugerencias que ellos nos hacen qué tenemos, cuáles son nuestras cualidades, qué sabemos hacer, qué nos faltaría, pero sobre todo nos permite tener una semana de trabajar todos juntos de manera vertical, donde los estudiantes más experimentados inspiran y dirigen a los que están empezando. Al mismo tiempo los que están empezando le hacen ver a los que ya tienen más experiencia que hay algunas cosas que dan por sentado que podrían cambiar también. En fin, se crean unas dinámicas que a partir de un equipo de docentes alucinantes, muchas gracias a todos por haber aceptado esta invitación, logramos como llevar adelante una misión que termina en una exhibición y que termina por una conferencia. En este caso, nuestros invitados de la cuarta edición son Emanuel y Christoph Gantenbein, que ahora Javier los va a presentar, pero primero que nada, un aplauso y agradecimiento a ellos. Es un lujo increíble poder contar con ellos, así que nada, le voy a pasar el micrófono a Javier para que haga una mínima introducción y ya los dejamos largar con el taller.
Bueno, gracias Marce, gracias a todos por venir temprano, también a los que están en el otro taller. Estamos muy contentos de que seamos muchas y muchos hoy para arrancar con pilas la segunda mitad del año. Y yo como director del CEAC también estoy muy contento porque este es el espacio en el cual el programa público de la escuela, ciclo de conferencias, seminarios, presentaciones de libros y demás, se cruza propiamente con la escuela, donde podemos tener un espacio para compartir que tenga que ver con la enseñanza y que también tenga que ver con grandes exponentes de la arquitectura contemporánea, como son Emanuel y Christoph Gantenbein. Estamos muy contentos de que hayan aceptado nuestra invitación, es muy especial para nosotros. Solo para presentarlos brevemente, ambos son arquitectos por la Escuela Técnica de Zurich, por la ETH Zurich, donde actualmente son profesores titulares de arquitectura. Esto es algo muy importante. Si ven la programación o los temas que venimos discutiendo en el CEAC en los últimos años, hay muchísimos arquitectos que nos interesan, que vienen de esta escuela, y tener profesores titulares de esta institución de vuelta enseñando acá con nosotros es un orgullo. También han dado clases en otras universidades alrededor del mundo, como la Academia de Mendrisio, como la Universidad de Oslo, como el Harvard GSD. Han hecho una serie de edificios muy significativos en Suiza, como el Museo Nacional de Zúrich, como el Kunsthaus de Basel. También han hecho otros edificios de otra escala y categoría, edificios de oficina, edificios de viviendas unifamiliares. Están sus libros en la biblioteca, en la vidriera, así que pueden chusmear su trabajo antes de la conferencia del viernes. Pero quiero destacar un tema en particular, razón por la cual los invitamos, que es la manera en que ellos vinculan su estudio con la investigación y con la enseñanza. De hecho, no es la primera vez que están en Buenos Aires. Ellos hace 14 años vinieron a Buenos Aires con sus estudiantes, hicieron un libro, aprendieron de Buenos Aires, aprendieron de las tipologías de arquitectura de Buenos Aires, utilizan eso que construyen en el espacio de enseñanza, lo utilizan después como una herramienta de proyecto, y nos parece que esta triangulación entre investigación, enseñanza y proyecto es fundamental. Así que, bueno, thank you so much, Manuel and Chris, for coming. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Javier. Hi. Just to get it started, thank you so much, Javier, for this very kind introduction. Marcelo, for all of you, for this wonderful invitation. It's very generous. We feel very privileged to be here with all of you, and we feel also very honored. I must say that we can now work and exchange with all of you for this week. And indeed, the first day of the semester, when we come back to school, is always very exciting. And to have one more of those in the year is a particular pleasure to us. So we're very excited. We're going to present what we prepared for you. We believe you have already received some information, but we would like to share that moment with all of you, also those who are sitting in the other rooms, that we can have a common understanding. And then, of course, also we would be happy to take the opportunity to maybe discuss and have answers to probable questions there are, but we will find out. Now I hand over to Christoph, who will start, and we do it together.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm also very happy to spend this week with you with this project that we call Buenos Aires Portrait. I think you got this reader per email as a PDF. This is what we prepared for you. It is a collection of information, but also a collection of material which is dear to us, which is also kind of should open up a cosmos of themes, of topics, but also of documents and how to draw and lay out architecture. It's you can also, if you print it, it's a double-page document. So it's a left and a right page. We will switch from page to page. I don't know who is left and who is right. We go through this document. Maybe you've already seen it in your mail order, maybe not. We go it through page by page. And what we are going to do is, as I said, it's a portrait. We will do a portrait of Buenos Aires. A portrait consists of two things. I mean, it's a question: who is portrait? No, it's a traditional topos in painting, but also a question: what technique is applied and who is portraying it? No? The author is absolutely relevant. There is no objectivity in a portrait. No? A person is portrayed by a certain photographer or a painter. The question of technique is relevant. Is it a drawing? Is it a painting? Is it a photography? But even if it's a photography, it's never objective. No? So the author, the one who makes this portrait, is relevant. And in this case, it's you. It's you who will, during this week, we all together as a group, will do a portrait of Buenos Aires. Emanuel and me, Emanuel said, we have been here 14 years ago. We don't know the city, but we want to kind of start with you that we say, even you, nobody knows this city really. So we would like to go with very fresh eyes. We start here and we want to find out what this city could be in an individual, in a subjective way. So this is the first page with a series of with a contact sheet of Ed O'Shea. We will later talk about him, this American artist who used photography and painting, and he was referring a lot to architecture and to the city. That's why he's important to us, but also because he works in a very systematic way. It's photos taken out of the car driving down a boulevard in LA and taking a photo of each building. We come back to this.
We have to figure out that's an empty page. And then comes the text. We will not read everything in every single word, but this maybe, if it's okay, read it for all of us again. Mission for this week's workshop. Buenos Aires Portrait. Buenos Aires, that is the almost infinite grid of streets and blocks. That is the everyday life that takes place in this structure. That is its history, past and present. That is its true and invented stories, its everyday culture and cultural highlights, monuments and people, its representation in media as film and photo, food and dance, music and literature, and much more. We want to make this large city with its identity, which is actually impossible to capture precisely, our project. Not like Le Corbusier did, who sketched a vision of a better Buenos Aires with dynamic lines on the blackboard. Our project is not another Buenos Aires, but a portrait of the city we know, and even more so, do not know. Looking at architecture means designing architecture. When we, as professional architects, study a building, a piece of infrastructure, or even a city, we try to understand, analyze, and learn from it. The critical exploration automatically harbors the core of a project. So our subjective view of a reality creates something new. And thus, we think reality into the future. We project, we throw it forward into the future. When we design, we don't create anything out of ourselves, but we develop what others have created over generations and pass it on to the ones that will follow us. So the creative explosion of the Renaissance, for instance, was based on the curious study and speculative reconstruction of ancient architecture. The ambition to imitate the ancients gave rise to completely new formal typological and urbanistic designs. Giovanni Battista Piranesi explored the Roman ruins with archaeological means, published them in countless planimetric and pictorial representations, and in this way reconstructed infrastructure work, monuments, and even the city of Rome itself in an inventive way. And even the built work and the fundamental architectural theory of Dennis Scott Brown and Robert Venturi are based on the empathic portrait of Las Vegas in plan, photography, and film. In this sense, we do see Buenos Aires not simply as a built reality, but as a project. Together, we will create a portrait of this city in the year 2025 by analyzing Buenos Aires through representation in different media. We are turning this city into our design, into our all design. By examining its built structure, we will discover the city, we will see it with new eyes. That's the third page.
So, how are we going to do that? The research method is as follows. The fantastic thing is, I heard there are about 400 students, so we are a huge crowd that can deal with this overwhelmingly huge city of Buenos Aires. So it's a group project, as we find this very contemporary to work as a group. Also to understand architecture as a common and a social discipline. This is the first point. The second point is we would rely very much on methods that comes from the arts. So pop art and conceptual art were, as they were addressing, pop art was addressing and showing an interest for the popular everyday thing. So it was about discovering the culture of the industrial age, which is a mass culture. So it had to apply new forms of working. So pop art and then also conceptual art is very about the big mass, about repetition, about seriousness, about comparisons, about systems. So there are artists which we will also present later, which are important, as I said, Ed Rocher, but also, for instance, Bernd and Hilla Becher or Thomas Struth, who use photography to document urban and architectonical phenomena. The third thing is, which is very specific to Buenos Aires, even if it's a huge city, it is somehow it is somehow a very logical city. It consists of a grid of streets. This grid forms the blocks, the manzanas, and in each block you have a system of more or less rectangular parcels. So this helped us. This gives this structure of the city is the basis for the structure of our research work that we will do together. You know, the political Buenos Aires, which is not the whole urban structure, but the political Buenos Aires consists of these 99 secciones, of 12,192 manzanas within these sections, and of 391,000 parcelas. So that will structure our work, the secciones, manzanas, and the parcelas. So assuming that we are around 400 students, that would mean 4 students per section will study one street in this manzana, one block at this street, and one building in this block. And this is the first design step that you will take, the decision, which street is it? I think you already got attributed the manzanas, no? Which street do you choose? And as every decision in architecture, this is part of the design. Do I take this street or this street? This is a decisive decision. And then, of course, which block and which building. So this will be the work that you will start with in the coming days, doing the field work.
This is easy. That's just the map to what Christoph just said, the 99 secciones. And we are now in section 27, is this correct? Just to make sure we find ourselves on the map. All the rest is then the division which has already partly taken place. So it's very big actually, but it's also not so big given the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires as a whole, but we believe it's an extensive piece of a city. And maybe it sounds crazy to you to try to cover this map, but we believe this is absolutely possible, and it's important that we do that. That we have the common ambition to understand, to get a representative idea of what these 99 secciones are about and how they relate to each other.
So we talk about streets, blocks, these manzanas, and the buildings, and we propose to attribute to each of these urbanistic, architectonical elements a specific way of representation. So the street, we propose to document it by a series of photos, standing in the middle of the street. Be careful. On the crossings, for instance, in each crossing to make a series from the center point in the axis of the street, showing the street as a space, as an urban space. And if you do a series on all the crossings, it will be a series that shows the whole development of a street through the manzana and maybe even beyond the manzana. That is up to you. In both directions.
The section.
In which exactly. Use your smartphone or maybe a camera. Try to avoid the third vanishing point. That it is not, you don't have this kind of falling lines, but it is a rectangle because the eye doesn't perceive the third vanishing point. It corrects it. The brain knows that the building is vertical, and we will then, there's the exhibition format will be clarified later, so it's also kind of a dynamic document, this syllabus. Photography, street photography. The block is about, we would say it's about the plasticity. The block is interesting because there is a kind of a hidden reality. We walk along the street, we see the facades, but very often you don't perceive the inner of the block. So we would encourage you to build a 1 to 200 model of the block, just the block. It will have the shape of the block, maybe the houses, the facades plus the sidewalk in 1 to 200. So if a manzana is maybe 100 by 100, 60 by 120, so it will be around 50, 60 centimeters by the same. We originally thought it would be nice to make a clay model, but maybe this is a bit difficult. No, a high-rise 22, 40, 50 meters. So we would suggest, as a change to the syllabus, to make styrofoam. And as the material is not so nice, we made very good experiences with kind of painting it with a kind of color or a gypsum layer to cover it and to give it a color. We thought maybe it would be nice if each of these 99 models has one color which is specific, which is representative for this manzana. Ones are maybe a bit kind of beige, others are grayish, or maybe even brick is dominating, or maybe even a strong color, or white. So each model only one color, and the surface is hiding the fact that it is a styrofoam model. The buildings are represented by plans, so it's photography, model and plans, ground floor and representative upper floor, plus the section which goes perpendicular to the street, so it shows the relation between the space of the street and the courtyard in a 1 to 100.
So with this method of representation, as you could already understand, we have a still dynamic, you called it, an open idea of creating a big exhibition at the end of this week. And this will be a memorable moment. At least that's, maybe we are a bit romantic about it, but also very serious, you know. It is capturing a moment of this city in August 2025. That's how Buenos Aires looked in all its neighborhoods in the inner city, you know. And to make an exhibition where you present that to all of us, that we have a common shared moment where we look at all these things, where we exhibit the models. Again, in a way, we have to define together in detail, but they will be amazing. So, also there, we are a bit boring. We say looking at something is already making a design. Producing a drawing is an exciting project, and we believe so. The decision, which photograph, all that is an act of authorship. In our case, collective authorship. And we are stressing this fact so much because, of course, as designers, we also like to invent buildings and things of which we don't know what they will be. But to start all that endeavor from looking at what is around us is absolutely fundamental. And we believe it's so fantastic in our profession that as architects, we have the privilege to be inspired by the world around us. And we have to learn and to practice techniques and sharpen our tools that help us to look at the world and to represent the world and hence make it our own project. And I'm so emphatic about that because that's also where we see the link to many colleagues, to generations of architects over centuries, but also Christoph mentioned it in the beginning. There we see a close connection to the arts, where we believe also you, the students, and all of us, also the teachers, again and again we can also learn from that and find out what is our architectural artistic practice and methodology. Streets, blocks, buildings is now the title to the second part in the document. So in essence, we shared already all information with you. So for those of you who are very impatient, you can already leave. But somehow the more important part is maybe now to follow. It is also a sort of an exhibition. It's a collection of a few pages, but we curated that selection of images. They speak about streets, blocks, and buildings, but they also, and that was our curatorial idea, if you will, we did that together with a colleague of ours in our ETH team, Federico Taverna. We collected photographs, representations of drawings, and also models. So we also tried to create or to offer a selection of material that can be inspirational. It's not a one-to-one recipe. It's again, we have to find our own ways. But take it as an inspiration, and let's look at it this way. So now we thought we would go through these images. Sometimes we tell a bit more, sometimes a bit less. You tell us when we have to finish, but because we love it so much, we can talk forever. But I think it would be nice that we go through the pages, and we also hope that you see the images in the different screens. Maybe you have to zoom in a little, or you have it also on your own device. We decided to keep it in the layout of the syllabus to make it even a bit smaller. Okay.
Okay, so we start with an example that most of you will know. This is learning from Las Vegas. This is, I would say, a very strong and very direct kind of role model of how we understand the research on Buenos Aires. First, Robert Venturi and Dennis Scott Brown, I mean, they just the object they wanted to portray, which was Las Vegas, which until then, of course, everybody knows what Las Vegas is, but for an architect, this was not the reference. No? It was a classical architecture. It was Rome for centuries, which was the reference. And now they go and say, learning from Las Vegas. So they choose a new object, and they choose also a new way of documenting architecture by driving through the city by car and taking photos out of the window. I mean, this is very close to what I was explaining now, that we suggest that you make, not out of a window of a car, but standing in the center of the street, taking a photo of the street as an urban space, portraying a street.
This is Giambattista Piranesi, 1756, but it's also a portrait of the street. It's the Via Appia in Rome, and many of you probably know that the provocation of Venturi Scott Brown was that they declared the Las Vegas Strip a collection of monuments, and this, in a way, is an ancestor of this idea. Of course, the monument here are the funeral monuments along the Via Appia outside of Rome, and it is this Piranesi who was doing research as an archaeologist, but doing that he invented even the illusion of ancient Rome, to which we still somehow refer today. But you see, it is a perspective drawing in this case, and we look at the series of these monuments that create the whole, the community, the shared space of the street.
So this is Ed Rocher. The title image was Ed Rocher, was the contact sheet, and this is now what he made out of this contact sheet. It is a leporello, a longitudinal, very long stripe of two photo collages showing the both sides of this sunset strip in LA. Even I think he even puts the numbers of the houses, no? And you can see it's a kind of it's relatively roughly done. It's cut out. It doesn't really fit. No? It's a pre-Photoshop time. And of course, by showing the both sides, he also somehow shows the space of the street, of this urban place. But what is important to us, that Rocher, who is also a painter, he is really helping us to look at the contemporary city, As Venturi and Scott Brown went to Las Vegas, he goes to Los Angeles, and what does he show us? I mean, it's some warehouses, it's ugly apartment buildings, it's a gas station. So it's his everyday architecture in which he's interested. So for us, he is not only important as for his working method of the systematic portraying of a street, but also because of his interest in the everyday architecture. And this will be a huge discussion. We would also love to have it with you while you are choosing the objects, the houses in your manzanas that you will represent, because this is so important, that the city doesn't consist of monuments and of exceptions, but it exists mainly out of unspectacular, grey, boring, ugly buildings. This is part of the city, and it was mainly this photography of this time which was raising the consciousness about this reality of our world.
The next in the collection is Thomas Struth, German photographer, famous artist. In this case here, the Pasaje Gaspar in Lima, taken in 2003. What is interesting, this is another artist, by the way, a highly rated artist, who in a way does the same. So what we're trying to say is even a working method to look at the ordinary of the city and to do it in a very systematic way. Whether it's Ed Rocher, who always follows the facade, or the Thomas Struth standing in the sort of the middle axis of the street, you could say this is so much of a schematic cooking recipe, but strangely, it turns out that it is a very profiled individual work. And Christoph spoke about the boring and the grey, which we love, and please listen to that. We love the boring grey of architecture, the ordinary of the city, but it's also nice, we have to admit, when there are colors once in a while, but also the way they are put. This is what one could call, or somebody did call it, this type of discoveries, that's an accidental masterpiece. This is also a composition. It's a decision to frame the image like that, to see the pale pink on the left, or apricot with this bluish grey, and then on the opposite side, the warm grey on this painted socle, the plinths of the yellow and the red, So this is architecture, but it's also just a portrait.
This is a series by the German painter Gerhard Richter. Of course, this is very important for German post-war art, because it deals with the history of Germany. It's Nuremberg, which is the most monumental leftovers of the National Socialist architecture. This public, huge monumental squares where these very iconic happenings would happen. So this is all in, but it's also a beautiful series in its aesthetics, and interesting also as he shows a series of photos which almost develop a kind of movie film-like series. So this will also be an interesting aspect when you shoot the images along a street, that in a series of images you can kind of suggest the movement through space.
This is just a map, a bit like our secciones, but this is Beijing, represented in the context of a video work by Ai Weiwei. the Chinese artist with whom we actually also could collaborate at some point, actually in this time. That's also why we remembered this work. We were not involved in that work at all, but he told about it at the time. It is a video installation that is called The Third Ring, and you see, maybe you can recognize the red line. It's also a sort of a top-down understanding, the big plan of the city, and the project consisted of a video portrait of this one big road. Taking video shots on every bridge, 1 minute in each direction. Fantastic.
That's Thomas Stuth again. You've seen the colorful portrait of Lima. This is an early work. He started in the late 70s. He went to New York and made this absolutely fantastic series of streets in New York, standing in the middle of the street. I mean, I would say this is maybe closest to what we imagine you doing. Of course, there are, for instance, no trees, but we are lucky that in winter some trees don't have leaves, so that you can that the architecture is visible, because it's of course about the relation of the singular objects or singular houses that form together an urban space, the street, which is the big issue when talking about architecture in the city. So I would say this is very clear how we imagine your photos, and we are curious to see the analogous examples from Buenos Aires.
Donald Appleyard, John Meyer, and Kevin Lynch, who actually also did some research on the image of the city, but that's a photo series from the 60s. It's maybe just another illustration of what Christoph should mentioned, the movement, the seriality of the street. Here, again, a bit different maybe from our perception. It's a series that is clearly related to the idea of a movement, of the dynamic perception of the urban space.
That's maybe a bit further away, but this series should also just create a kind of a cosmos, as I said, and be inspiring for you. This is a film still from Night on Earth. You might know this Jim Jarmusch movie. They're based in LA, Paris, Helsinki, Rome. No? These 4 cities. And somehow, of course, all these stories they play in a taxi in these different cities, but somehow the protagonist, you could say, is the city around they are driving through.
Our collection that we are looking at together with you is half systematic, but it's also then a bit more free, but still we were a bit more with the streets up to now here. And this, again, is still the representation of the street. It's exactly the method that we just got to know through Ed Ruscha, the Sunset Strip in LA. But this is, actually, that's interesting. The same or similar time, we're talking of the 60s and the 70s. And that was not by coincidence that artists, architects, and intellectuals somehow turned their interest again back to the city, to the historic city, but also to the everyday of the city. That was the moment when modernism, maybe, the idea of creating a better world through the new project of the modern city came or reached a point of crisis and doubt. No? So the young generation, they tried to discover something, maybe even discover the future of the city in the past of the city by looking at it very carefully and trying to reconquer the urban territory, if you will, in their academic and artistic practice. And what is beautiful in this project from the 1970s, it started 1970, I believe, in the case of this example. It's called Via Giulia. This is the street that is in Rome, Via Giulia, una utopia urbanistica del Cinquecento. You see, so it's historiographic, but at the same time there is the name or the word of utopia. So it was really, in the end, an ambitious project to get a hint and an idea how to think maybe our city of today. And this portrait again of the building, every building along this historic street of the Via Giulia is represented in this publication by Manfredo Tafuri, the very influential teacher and theoretician from that period.
So another example of the very same culture, one could say, of intellectual Italian architects, urbanists. Tafur is one, but even more important is Aldo Rossi, who was teaching in Zurich in the 1970s. And he did another kind of crowd project, as we are doing this week, which is this map of the plan of Zurich, or the center of Zurich. Emanuel was mentioning until now it was a series of documents that were showing the street as a public space. Now we are switching to the block, the Manzana. Of course, this is the medieval city. You can see maybe this empty space left is the Roman castle, and with very early medieval structures around. And then later medieval structures on the northern side of the river. So it's interesting because it brings together the urban scale of the map with architectonical scale of these buildings by doing this very. It was time before any digital means. No, you had to look for these plans in the archive, draw them through in this very scale, bring them all together. But it is a very valuable and also meanwhile historic documents, because the city looks differently. There are changes even in this historical city. So it is also a historical document of 1947 about 74 of Zurich.
This is actually three stills from this Ai Weiwei project of which I spoke a minute ago. Still the street a little bit, so you see our composition is not fully systematic, which is important. The third ring in Beijing, I mean.
And this is another Edroche project. We've seen the systematic, very long document of the Sunset Strip, these perpendicular photos of each building. He also did beautiful small booklets. One is 37 swimming pools, one is 13 parking lots, and another one is some Los Angeles apartments, which is also interesting as he turns the attention to what we would call really the architecture without architects, no? the ugly investors' architecture. That will be exactly, as I said, no? The question, which role plays this kind of anonymous, undesigned architecture in the choice that you will have to do.
And this is a very famous, beautiful sheet of a publication by Camillo Sitte, whom you probably know from your theory and history classes. It's, you could say, more now dedicated to the scale of the block. It's a very specific type of block or cluster of buildings here in the research of Camillo Sitte. It's the city center, the historic core of many European cities, namely Vienna and Salzburg, but many others, where we often see a church and a square, maybe a chapel to the side. So the interest of this portrait was to understand how monuments and ordinary buildings are forming public space and what the relationship is between them. And we also like the title, City Planning According to Artistic Principles. And that's, again, this is an invention not by the architects who built at the time, but it's Camillo Sitte at the end of the 19th century, that he is the one who discovers and declares that this is almost an artistic practice, this type of urbanism, you know. And we believe also in Buenos Aires we find urbanism by artistic principles, but it's a different logic, it's a different art. What is also beautiful, and that's why it's in our syllabus, in our collection, it's also a very beautiful way of making just a drawing where you see what the focus of interest is.
So this document is published in Aldo Rossi's L'Architettura della Città, and it originally comes from Hegemann. Werner Hegemann was a political activist, urban designer, and also a writer about urbanism in the beginning of 20th century. So it's about the discussions that were led at that time about hygiene in the city. So he shows different forms of blocks. You can easily see in the middle these very, very dense blocks, how they were built in 19th century. Very, very, very dense, with very bad air and light conditions, and then somehow modern proposals of open courtyards, which have much more light, sun, and air. So it is a kind of a proto-modern discussion. And of course, Aldo Rossi is interested in this proto-modern rationalism, because it still believes in the city, it still believes in the street and in the courtyard, and he has a very big interest in also German architecture, rational architecture, early modern architecture. That's why he published it here. And of course, this has a very lot to do then with what we are researching on the manzanas. It's about the inner organization of a block, which is a lot about light and air. I don't know if you know this very beautiful publication by Javier on Lucy, or Iris, which is focusing exactly somehow. It's the perfect relation here to Berlin, probably. I think it's Berlin, no? This constant fight between density, and density often equals money. The more you can rent, the more you can sell, the more money you take out. And of course, these very precarious light and air conditions which result from it. So we are really curious to see then in these models, because they exactly talk about this inner balance of mass and space.
And speaking of the model, here is a model that we like so much. It's actually a bad example to what Christoph just said, because that's the inversion. That's the modernist. The typical modernist solution is the freestanding slab. And it's the Swiss artists Peter Fischli and David Weiss who created a fantastic, wonderful series of these small clay models. They are big like that. And they call it moderne Siedlung. You can say modern development or modern settlement. And it comes almost with a sense of irony. So this is maybe not a precise portrait. This is more like an invention. It's an idea of a city. But speaking of a reduced model that introduces the right degree or number of details, the right degree of precision, but also fuzziness and sketchiness is an interesting question. And we love these very famous clay models, and we thought it could be interesting to use it as an example, as a reference to our own model making. But as already said, there is maybe also other ways we can be, of course, pragmatic about that. But it works.
Yes, it works. As we did try out with our students at ETH, it was a semester on the periphery of Paris, where students made these clay models, but in smaller scales. I think it was 1 to 500. And of course, it's very beautiful, this scale of the building, of the block, as it is very much about, as I said, plasticity. If you say the street is about the space, shown by photography. Then the block is about the plasticity of the composition of these buildings in one manzana, which goes very well together with the plastical character of the clay, but also of the styrofoam, as we described out.
And it goes on. This is Giovanna Silva. She is a fantastic photographer. Also a friend. She lives in Milan, traveling the world as a photographer, with a background as educated as an architect, I believe. A series that is approaching a sort of an approximation to a very generic modern architecture in this case. City, I Listen to Your Heart is the title of this series, and it's identifying these very informal, casual moments of maybe coming home to your rather sad house, maybe, no? But this is also about identity. With what do we identify? Where is my house? Is it a yellow color? Is it the specific form of the window? And by repeating it here in this composition, it is working to focus on a few specific elements that define maybe more the atmosphere and the character of a place in architecture. We are not tired yet. The microphone is already a bit getting weak. I hope you are surviving, because we have to absolutely go through the series. Okay.
Correct. Another example from the 60s is Oswald Matthias Ulrich, German architect. We saw Aldo Rossi, we saw Ed Rocher. We always come back to the 60s because we think this is a crucial moment when architects, artists start to criticize the modern city and its architecture, and this is a moment of very inspiring new attempts of talking about it, about the city and architecture, and also producing it. And this is a very abstract model, as it shows a settlement for housing. And these blocks, they are somehow the apartment itself, and somehow the corridors and the elevators and staircases are left away. So it is an abstraction of a project for housing. And this is a new way of talking about architecture in the 60s. No, it's about this formal quality. It's about the morphology of the city, which is created by housing. No? It's overcoming functionalism, which is a pure technical discipline, or turned architecture and urbanism in pure technical discipline. So it is an attempt of regaining architecture as a discipline which is about form, because form is the language that we use as architects.
Dan Graham was an American artist who did this famous series of a body of work which is called Homes for America, and this is a photographic work from 1966, and you see this row, and it's so beautiful. We also thought we tell you through this series a bit who we are and what we like. It's stubborn repetition, it's generic architecture, but you even see the composition. You see that every house has a bit of a face somehow. It's a symmetrical or almost symmetrical composition of the opening, but then it is repeated. And it is a programmatic image about what is the subject of this whole week, and a bit our mission to you is that we believe in the end we cannot really separate the house from its neighbors, from the street, from the city. So being architects or urbanists and historians and theoreticians, in the end, we believe that even in this boring, maybe horrifying American suburbia, lies this beauty of the interdependence of house and street and city and ultimately environment, if you will. And I believe this is still true today, and also to you, we hope that you share our passion for and interest in again and again understanding that relationship.
So now in the logic of streets, blocks, and buildings. We come closer to the buildings. This is also a very important publication, which is the pamphlet architecture, which is an American publication, which is still existing in a loose rhythm. There's a mistake. This is not 1970. It is 1980, when Stephen Hall was publishing one issue about the alphabetical city, and it is a collection of buildings, mainly New York, Chicago, of very super urban, huge buildings, and he orders them following the alphabet. So there are these H. This is a H type, but there is also the I. This is the T. There is the L. There is the E. There is the O. There's lots of letters from the alphabet are there, and of course this is a bit a postmodern discussion, no? To transfer the logic of one discipline into another. So he talks about, of course, the letters that create a text, and then it's a texture of the city and the text of the city. But it is a fantastic publication, as it is showing great examples. No, I mean these super powerful buildings like this one, for instance. But it also shows a very crucial relation between the city and the object. No? The city texture that is built by the object, and the object, which is of course the building, as an object is defined by the conditions that the city defines. And here we meet a very, to us, very important methodological term, which is the one of the type, the building type, and the typology is the collection of types. So this is a typology. He collects buildings and he makes an order, a classification following a certain logic, which is in this case the alphabet. So the booklet is a typology of types. And what is a type? A type comes from typos, which is the Greek word, which is about printing or pressing, no? And typography is of course related to this one. So one could say it's the print, no, the footprint of a building. So it is the feature, its quality in an abstracted way, which defines it.
Christoph just spoke about the footprint, the imprint, the plan, if you will, the figure on the ground of a building. But also the section is important. That's why we will also make sections. And we chose this example of the Mausoleum of Hadrian, which is also the Castello Sant'Angelo in Rome, because it evolved and got transformed and added on, as you certainly know. I actually forgot to ask Federico who made the drawing, so I don't know who made the drawing. It looks like maybe first half of 20th century. I would certainly say it is in the tradition of Piranesi, the inventive archaeologist, and the drawing speaks about what is in this thick object, which is almost like a mountain, a palace, a mausoleum. And I'm pretending. It's perhaps impossible to really measure every space and every wall. Look how thick they are. So you have to speculate when you make a drawing. And the section that we're looking at here is an analytical, but also an imaginatory tool. And that's why we are showing it to you, the composition of the spaces and the mass, the full and the empty. And I'm sure when we speak about the building, whether it's a small one or a big one, in one of the manzanas or in one of the streets here in Buenos Aires, we will not be able to measure everything precisely. We might find information in the coming days, but maybe also not. That's our form of archaeology and research. And please, have the imagination, be the architects to produce the drawing to its full completion, even if we have to speculate. That's also why we show this fantastic example of a building that you can almost impossibly fully understand.
This is also, I can say, this is a typology of a collection of constructive elements in a classical order of columns, of capitals, of friezes. So of course everything also in natural science, you can create an order as a research method to understand things by just putting similar things together and therefore find something out about the logic behind. But what we also find interesting and why we show you this document is because it also shows the potential of a drawing. The drawing, which is, as it is etching, I think it's based on lines, but nevertheless it makes an expression about plasticity, about materiality, about light and shadow, about surface, about the tactility. So we would also encourage you when you're drawing the floor plans and the sections by going into detail and bring as much information as possible and as useful into your drawings.
This is a model by Hans Pölzig from 1917, unrealized project for the town hall of Dresden at the time. German expressionism, but also a very artistic form, new form of modernism, I would say. Hans Pölzig is one of our heroes. And the model, we thought it's nice. Christoph suggested maybe we don't do the Fischli Weiss children's model clay, but maybe we do something which is more using styrofoam and then paint it, put paint, or even maybe a sort of emulsion with paint and gesso, we have to see, and gypsum. This is a gypsum model, but we don't know the exact, I never saw it in reality, I don't know whether it still exists. It's also beautiful because it speaks also about the photography of the model, and that's also something we will do. You will take a picture of the model in the end, I believe, beside the model itself. And it's the plasticity, 1 to 200 is perhaps something like that. We can see the volume and we can see a certain structure and texture of the surface, but not more, but also not less.
I was talking about the potential of the line drawing. This is a very beautiful floor plan of a very beautiful project, one of our favorites. This is the mosque in Cordoba, built 8th to 13th century, but later on, so this is not very correct because the church that you see in the middle, which is a fantastic project, as it appropriated this mosque and didn't destroy it. Somehow, by introducing this church, it was guaranteeing that this fantastic structure of this Islamic architecture survived. And it also shows the potential of the floor plan by introducing, for instance, the ceiling, of mirroring the ceiling, the structure of the ceiling down, and making the floor plan a spatial drawing.
Okay. So in the meantime, I guess everybody understood it's not just an introduction to the exercise, it's actually a lecture. And there is quite a bit of theory and many references. Please also see it not only as a sort of aggressive way of welcoming you to the semester, see it also as an invitation to maybe engage with us during the week, to maybe also pick some of the topics that we are mentioning now, and let's discuss them now. Because we are practitioners, and we will speak about that more on Friday. Yes, we are practitioners, but we also believe that the theory and history is a framework that we all need to be relevant in our daily work of practice. And another hero, as there have been many heroes, is actually Rafael Moneo, speaking of practitioners and theoreticians or practitioners who have their theory and their understanding of the framework of theory. And by the way, also an architect who maybe still is, certainly used to be a very influential teacher between also Europe and America. So therefore, Rafael Moneo, who is based in Madrid, taught for many, many years at Harvard. He published in 1978 a text which we believe is still very valid on typology, so on this very topic that is so central also to the discourse we are proposing here. And in this publication in the series of opposition, 1978, he also shows a few illustrations. This is just one of them. You could also say it's a placeholder, I believe a very beautiful one. It's like faience plates in the representation of faience plates, so of an image collection of towers and houses in the palace of Minos in Knossos in Crete. And so there is many references in between. But what we're looking at is a group of very elementary architecture, right? And we look at not only one of them, but we look at the whole series. And this is the moment where I would stress again what we already now mentioned a couple of times, that it's always about these two aspects or the two perspectives. It's the individual object, but it's also the series, the collective. That's also ultimately where the city comes into play. And I won't read now too much of a whole text, but if you are still with us, also in the other room, maybe that's already empty, we don't know, we can't see it, but that's okay. But this is not in the syllabus. It's just a short quote from Moneo, speaking in the context of types and typology of the architectonical object. On the one hand, I quote, "On the one hand, a work of architecture has to be considered in its own right as an entity in itself. That is, like other forms of art, it can be characterized by a condition of uniqueness. From this point of view, the work of architecture is irreducible within any classification. It is unrepeatable, and so forth. That's the uniqueness. And there is an author, and there is a specific moment in space and time that is this object, or that leads to this object. But then, I quote again, on the other hand, a work of architecture can also be seen as belonging, look at the picture, to a class of repeated objects, characterized like a class of tools or instruments by some general attributes. From the first hut to the archaic stone construction, primitive architecture conceived of itself as an activity similar to other kinds of craftsmanship, such as the making of textiles, pottery, baskets, and so on." And then I jump a little bit. At the end, we could say, in this sense, the uniqueness of the architectural object was denied when we looked at it in this way, producing it like a pot or something. From this point of view, a work of architecture, a construction, a house, like a boat, a cup, a helmet, can be defined through formal features which express problems running from production to use and which permit its reproduction. That's essential. A type, a house, a boat, or a pair of shoes is not always reinvented. You sort of use what's already there and you make your version of it. In these terms, it can be said that the essence of the architectural object lies in its repeatability. End of quote. So, unique, repeatable. Look at the streets out there. Are these houses unique or are they repeated? Are they all the same? In the case of Van Graham, they were exactly the same. Very often, they are something in between. And we believe this is beautiful and essential also to our understanding who we are as architects and authors.
So this is somehow the perfect illustration of what Emanuel was saying, was quoting. This is even called typology. It's Bernd, there's a B missing, Bernd and Hilavecio, this German couple, who did I would say it was an archaeology of industrial architecture, origin in Germany and then also all over the world. Archaeology of something which was disappearing in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the deindustrialization, when these coal mines and this steel industry was collapsing and these buildings were disappearing. They were portraying mines, cooling towers, industrial plants, steel factories, and so on. And so they were focusing on a very utilitarian architecture, what Emanuel was saying, or quoting when Monet describes it, that architecture is like a tool, like a tool or a pottery. It's a useful object and it should be repeatable. That's the idea of it. So if you build a cooling tower, it's not about the individual shape, but it's about its functioning, its technical functioning, and the way how it is made, which defines it. It is a group, but it is repeated. You know what a cooling tower is. You need a cooling tower, you build it. But nevertheless, of course, there is a huge series as they are developing over time. They have different conditions, they have different requirements. So even if it is a very technical object, you have the individuality. So this series shows very beautifully this ambivalence of the architectonical object, which is an individual one, and at the same time it is part of a bigger family.
Okay, you got it, another group. And it also shows that when you make a drawing, you decide in every document again and again what is important and what's not important. Here it's about the outline of a building. Investigations into the character of buildings, 1788. Interesting time. We skip now this other sort of excursus, but looking at a building, at a house, like at a persona. A building has a physiognomy, a building has a character, there is a face. And that's also quite interesting to look at all the entremedianeras and their outline and their accidental small windows, like a face.
This is just a very beautiful photography out of an architecture school of Urbanos, which was kind of the Bauhaus of early Soviet Union, when very radical modern architecture was still possible. And this is the student works, and of course it relates very much to what we do. You will do research on 99 buildings in these manzanas, but at the end it's not about each single project of your small group of 4 students, but it will also be the whole, and it talks about, it's like a city now. When you bring together all these individual student works, at the end it also bears in it the idea of the city, as the city, of course, is the collection of its architecture.
The drawing of the facade, it's actually a commercial advertisement for Olivetti of the 1950s, which is also beautiful. So that's a collection of all the buildings in which Olivetti at the time was present as a company. So it's corporate architecture recomposed into a sort of urban fabric. And you see on the bottom right, Buenos Aires. There is also in this very specific typology of facades, we find our city here.
Another Bernd and Hilavecio, in this case, the coal bunkers. I was talking about it, the typology. What is also interesting, of course, they were very important as teachers also. So Thomas Struth, who we have seen, but also Thomas Ruff and Andreas Kurski, they are students, or Candida Höfer, they are students of Bernhard Hillerbecher, so they're very much influenced. But what is also interesting is this kind of very objective, almost scientific way of taking photographs. Of course, I say photography is never objective, but the way they do it is somehow trying to achieve the most standardized way, taking perpendicular photos. It's always frontal. There is always a kind of a neutral sky. It's this kind of grayish, whitish sky. There is never a strong shadow. It's never sunshine. Sometimes they even took photos from all the four sides. It's like in a prison where you take the photo of the prisoner from the front and from laterally. So it is. Also in terms of the formal quality of applying the photography, a very specific piece of art.
This is the last picture. 2 more pages after that, and then it's over. This is now this before mentioned Andreas Kurski, who monumentalized the typological gaze of Bernhard Hillerbecher, who were his teachers. One of these mentioned very famous photographers, monumental pieces looking at the world in this frontal way, and also aestheticizing maybe even the horrors of modernism in the case of, what could say, Paris Montparnasse. But so what we're trying to say with this is also you can build a very successful career on typology and just describing the city. Yeah? So there is high stakes up there.
So this is now very concrete how we imagine this week, but the document is already a bit outdated. So today, 4th of August, this was the introduction. We suggest that since the day is already half past, that you will start doing a research online at the school and planning your field trip that will happen tomorrow early with the sunrise. So that you do a research in Google about your section to find out which streets you could eventually portray and which manzanas, to find out as much as possible. I don't know if you have a library, you have maybe also literature about the city, that you collect information and that you have an idea that tomorrow, because a section is quite a big thing and you cannot just start there without any intention, so that you have a plan which can also be changed when you're there. Maybe you find out more, but that you have a plan what street and what's it, and you want to research. So that would be so that would be today the work. And tomorrow it's field work. Go there, take photos as much as possible. I mean, as Emanuel said, there's maybe a certain point where you also have to be inventive. But try to be researchers. I mean, the streets are accessible, buildings can be accessible. Try to convince people to let them document their buildings. Try to have access to the courtyard. If not, Google helps. But of course, that has feasibility. Sometimes with our students, what we also did, if you have access to a house, you cannot take measurements of every wall and every window. Take photos from outside. I mean, you can count the floors.
within a staircase you can count the steps. So by counting the steps and knowing that one step is maybe 17 to 18 centimeters high, you can already know a lot about the height of the building. Sometimes, I don't know how it is here, you have these fire escape, fire evacuation diagrams in the staircases that could help. Maybe you have even archives, but do sketches, take photos that help you then to go back and draw the floor plans of the house and build the model of the Mansala. This intermediate review is maybe not very fixed, but it would be good to reconnect with your teachers, and we will be there too to exchange on your findings and discussions about it. And then on 7th will be the final review of where the formalities of the final review we will communicate it later. There will be the lecture by us.
Javier just said the dates are maybe wrong, and there will be a recap also in Spanish for these steps, how we organize the work, just to also to give you this information. And now, last but not least, I don't know when, but in between all this work, you will certainly be eager to expand a bit your knowledge and to give more, but it can also go beyond this workshop, we hope so. We just collected a few texts of which we think they could be inspirational and helpful. Some of it has been mentioned now along the lines that we shared with you. Kevin Lynch, The City Image and Its Elements. It's about maybe the question of identity and the image of a city that it gives. Colin Rowe, Collage City, is a very important, very famous text in this pivoting moment when the young generation at the time started to look in a new way at the city, in this post-late modern moment. A very charming text is the text number 3. This is an interview with Peter Eisenman, who speaks about his experience traveling to Italy, in this case, together with his mentor, Colin Rowe. And it's about traveling, looking at the world, what you learn when you look at the building and how you do that. That's a very personal statement. It's a very beautiful text to read. Text number 4 has been mentioned at length, Learning from Las Vegas. Text number 5 on typology, you've heard it. Text number 7, Delirious New York, perhaps one of the most, or the most famous text of the last 50 years. It is really what a mind, a very imaginative mind of an architect can produce when he or she would look at a city. Jane Jacobs, also about New York being an inhabitant, a citizen, and almost an activist, claiming their view onto the city against the power of, let's say, modern urbanism of at the time. And then number 6, it has been mentioned in the introduction by Javier, and it's on that note that we would end. We also published a book, actually 2, Typology. In 2012, we published the first volume on New York, Hong Kong, Rome, and Buenos Aires. It's here. It's also in the display in the library, but we brought one. We thought 2 copies for 400 or 500 people is maybe better. And I should also say that we just met again Fernando Diez, who wrote at the time a beautiful text and gave some insight and context to our visit and our attempt to understand the typology of Buenos Aires 14 years ago. So we're very grateful for that and also very happy to meet again now here today. Anyways, this is the book. It's here. And because we bring everything we are and what we know to you guys here, we also brought another one, but even this is already here. So, and we love gray. There's 3 gray books. And this is the monograph of a sort of curated archive of what Christoph Gantenbein studio has done over the last 25 years. So there is also, if you want to have a look, it's a gift to the school. That's more also about the practice and how we then in these 2 or 4 books can make the bridge between research and practice. Voilà, I think that's what we have prepared. So thanks for your patience and your
Thank you so much, Emanuel and Christoph, for the wonderful lecture. So to switch to Spanish and to organize the day.